in Alderdice High School.
People running for their lives, panicking. This video from inside a church in Brighton Heights. A funeral was being live streamed when a barrage of bullets was fired right outside.
I don't know who did this, but whoever did this, let me tell you something. God gonna have his way with you, because there was no reason for this to happen today.
The shooting prompted a massive police response. Officers from all over raced to the Destiny of Faith Church on Brighton Avenue. This, of course, just the latest in a string of violent incidents in the city.
A church funeral turns into target practice. The victim they're burying? John Hornezes Jr., killed just 13 days earlier in a gas station shootout. The shooters? They waited outside for 30 minutes, dressed in black, faces covered, watching mourners arrive. Then they opened fire, in broad daylight, at a church. This isn't about gang violence anymore. This is about what happens when nobody is safe, not even at a funeral. Pittsburgh police would later admit their officers went to the wrong location. The family had begged for protection. They got nothing, and 5 people paid the price. John James Hornezes Jr. was 20 years old.
Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Yeah! Yeah! Let's go! Let's go! Yeah! Yeah! Where my pops at? Where my pops at? Yeah! Yeah! Hey, tell him, Jit! Tell him, Jit! Yeah!
Born and raised in Pittsburgh, he was the kid you'd find on every basketball court from the Pittsburgh Project to Urban Impact. The game wasn't just something he played, it defined him. People who knew John described someone who'd hand over his last $20 without thinking twice. Who'd back you up before you even asked? Who could make you laugh when nothing else could? But they also described someone still trying to figure life out in a neighborhood where wrong choices come with permanent consequences. He wanted stability. Not for himself, but for the people he loved. Simple goals in a complicated world. Here's what matters. John wasn't perfect. He made choices. Some good, some that would cost him everything. But at 20 years old, he was still somebody's son, somebody's friend, somebody who thought he had time to get it right. He didn't. Before we continue, if real-life family crime grips you, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and smash subscribe with the bell so you never miss a new case on Fatal Family Network. October 15th started like any other Saturday. John made plans with 2 friends. Nothing special, just meeting up at the Sunoco on Cedar Avenue. They'd figure out the rest from there. The 3 of them stood on the sidewalk, waiting for a bus. An SUV rolled past, slow, deliberate. The surveillance cameras were rolling. They captured everything that happened next. And what happened next would leave 3 people dead and change multiple families forever. John and his friends weren't just standing there anymore. As that SUV crept by, they made a choice that would echo through their community for months to come. The footage doesn't lie. 3 young men suddenly reaching for weapons. The SUV still moving when the first shots rang out. John and his companions unleashed everything they had at that vehicle. But here's what they didn't count on. The people in that SUV came prepared too. Return fire erupted immediately. What started as an ambush became a 2-way shooting gallery. The gas station transformed into a war zone. People abandoned their cars, dove behind pumps, scattered in every direction. 2 women stood at that bus stop, Betty Jean Averitt, Jacqueline Mahalik. They were waiting for the same bus John had been waiting for. They had nothing to do with whatever dispute was playing out in front of them. They were just there, 2 innocent women who woke up that morning with their own plans, their own lives, their own families waiting for them to come home. They wouldn't make it home. John took a bullet during the exchange. The young man who'd left his house thinking about weekend plans was now bleeding out on Cedar Avenue. Within minutes, 911 calls flooded dispatch. Multiple people shot. First responders arrived to a scene of devastation. CPR started immediately. Trauma teams worked desperately. But for John Hornezes Jr., Betty Jean Averitt, and Jacqueline Mahalik, it was already too late. 3 lives ended because of a dispute that lasted less than 30 seconds. So now we've got 3 bodies on Cedar Avenue. Police arrive, and they're trying to piece together what just happened. You know what's crazy? This whole thing was captured on multiple cameras. The gas station, the businesses nearby, even traffic cams. Detectives start with the obvious. Who was shooting at who, and why? They quickly figure out this wasn't random. Within days, they identify one of the SUV's occupants, 19-year-old Karen Troutman. Police label him a gang member. He gets charged with killing John. Meanwhile, remember John's friend who survived with the leg wound? That's 21-year-old Charles Hines. Now here's where it gets complicated and tragic. Hines was standing with John, shooting at the SUV. But his bullets? They're the ones that killed Betty Jean Averitt and Jacqueline Mahalik, those 2 innocent women at the bus stop. So now Hines is facing double homicide charges for their deaths.
My mother lived in the high-rise on the north side. She wasn't just standing at the bus stop. That was a place that she lived for 5 years. She was a resident in the area of the north side. So I'm just heartbroken and my soul is empty.
Now you'd think after losing John in such a violent way, his family could at least bury him in peace. You'd be wrong. See, John's family knew something the rest of us might not have understood. In situations like this, the violence doesn't always end with the first shooting. They were scared, really scared. Scared enough to formally request police protection for the funeral. 2 officers were assigned to be there. Remember that detail. It becomes important. October 28th, Destiny of Faith Church on Brighton Road. Over 100 people show up to say goodbye to John. The service starts around 9:40 in the morning. For about an hour, everything's normal. Well, as normal as a funeral for a 20-year-old can be. But across the street, something's happening. 2 figures dressed in all black, faces covered with balaclavas, are lurking near a restaurant. For 30 minutes, they're just watching, waiting. One's holding a handgun in plain sight. The other's got something hidden under his jacket. You watching this on surveillance footage, and you're thinking, how does nobody notice these guys? 2 people in ski masks with guns, just hanging around outside a church? At 11:03 a.m., they make their move. Lots ringing out, sending folks scrambling outside Destiny of Faith Church. That's how witnesses described it. But the surveillance footage? It shows you exactly how calculated this was. These weren't random shots fired in anger. The gunman walked up and started shooting into the crowd of mourners. People who just spent the last hour crying over John's casket were now running for their lives. Watch the footage, and you see a woman get hit, fall, then still try to crawl to safety. You see people diving behind cars, some trying to get back inside the church, others just running in any direction that's away from the bullets. Inside the church, pure panic. The mourners, many already weeping from the emotional weight of the service, now found themselves trapped in a nightmare. Can you imagine? You're sitting in a pew, maybe holding someone's hand, trying to process your grief. Then gunshots, loud, close, and you realize there's nowhere to go. Some people hit the floor, others scrambled under pews. Parents threw themselves over their children. 5 people got shot that day. Thank God they all survived. But the trauma? That's permanent. So who does something like this? Who shoots up a funeral? The surveillance footage becomes crucial again. Detectives track a black car seen before and after the shooting. They follow it camera by camera, street by street. Technology doing what witnesses couldn't, providing a trail. The car gets abandoned in Brighton Heights. More cameras pick up the suspect's movements. They're traced to McKees Rocks, where police find them stuck in traffic on the McKees Rocks Bridge. Perfect spot to be trapped, actually. Nowhere to run when you're on a bridge. 19-year-old Sean Davis and 16-year-old Hezekiah Nixon. When officers approach, one drops his gun right there on the bridge. The other? He throws his weapon into the river below, like that's going to make this all go away. They're charged with attempted homicide, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, firearms violations, multiple counts of each. These are the kind that end young lives in different ways, behind bars instead of in the street. Remember when I told you John's family requested police protection for the funeral? Remember how I said officers were assigned? Well, here's the part that's going to make your blood boil. Those 2 officers, they went to the wrong location. Let that sink in. The family is terrified. They know something might happen. They specifically ask for help. The department says yes, assigns 2 officers, and then those officers show up at some other funeral home, find nothing happening there, and just leave. Meanwhile, across town, masked gunmen are loading their weapons outside the actual funeral. We look at each situation differently. If there's a request and it falls through the cracks, that's something that has to be immediately looked at. That's Pittsburgh Police Major Crimes Commander Richard Ford. A law enforcement source later revealed the truth. Those 2 officers, they weren't just at the wrong location. They got pulled for another assignment at the last minute. They were planning to swing by the funeral after handling this other call. By the time they were heading back, the shooting was already over, the damage already done.
Rick Earl joins us live. And Rick, I understand you just learned that the police officers that were requested by the church were not there.
Yeah, that's right, Lisa. Multiple family members here outside the hospital were telling me this afternoon the police officers were supposed to be at that funeral, but they say no one ever showed up. Now, I did speak with a law enforcement source just a short time ago. They confirmed that 2 officers, 2 Pittsburgh police officers, were assigned to that detail. But those officers at the very last minute were pulled for another assignment. After completing that other assignment, those officers planned to return to the funeral, and that's when the shots were fired and the shooting broke out. Again, my source telling me it's not normal procedure for Pittsburgh police officers to attend these funerals, but they suspect there was somebody anticipating possible trouble at that site, and that's why those officers may have been requested in the first place. Again, those officers pulled for another assignment, and then they were going back to the church, and when they were on their way back, the shooting happened.
Here's what kills me about this. Beth Pittsinger from the Citizen Police Review Board made a point that should be obvious. Given how John died, in a public shootout with multiple casualties, shouldn't police have been at that funeral whether the family asked or not? The 2 officers were reportedly suspended, but nobody knows for how long. Nobody knows if any supervisors face consequences. Nobody knows if anything actually changed to prevent this from happening again. The legal proceedings move forward, but I'm not going to drag you through months of court dates. Here's what matters. Karen Troutman faces homicide charges for John's death. Charles Hines faces double homicide for the 2 innocent women. Sean Davis and Hezekiah Nixon face multiple attempted homicide charges for the funeral shooting. Young men in their teens and 20s, all looking at decades behind bars. All because of disputes that nobody can even properly explain anymore. So where does this leave us? 3 crime scenes, 8 shooting victims, 3 dead, a community traumatized, and questions that won't go away. Betty Jean Averett and Jacqueline Mahalik died for nothing. They were just waiting for a bus. John Hornezes Jr. died at 20, his basketball dreams ending on a gas station sidewalk. The violence followed him to his own funeral, where 5 more people nearly lost their lives. We need to make sure that this never happens again, and we will be working around the clock to do whatever is necessary to apprehend those that did this heinous thing today. Those words ring hollow when you realize how preventable the funeral shooting was. 1 phone call, 1 correct address, 2 officers showing up where they were supposed to. That's all it would have taken. John's family remembers him as the kid who lived for basketball, who'd protect his friends, who tried to find his way in a world that didn't give him many good options. They remember his smile, his loyalty, that big heart everyone talks about. But here's the truth. Nobody wants to say out loud. In neighborhoods where violence breeds violence, where disputes turn deadly in seconds, where even funerals aren't safe, how many more John Hornezes are we going to lose? How many more innocent bystanders like Betty and Jacqueline are going to die because they happen to be standing in the wrong spot? This isn't just a story about one young man's death. It's about what happens when the systems meant to protect us fail, When violence becomes so normalized that shooting up a funeral seems like a reasonable response. When falling through the cracks costs lives. John James Hornezes Jr. should be 22 years old right now, maybe playing basketball somewhere, maybe figuring out his next move. Instead, his story ended in a cascade of bullets that didn't stop even when they lowered him into the ground. And somewhere in Pittsburgh, another young man is standing on another corner, making choices that might lead to another funeral, another shooting, another cycle that won't end until we decide enough is enough. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If this story hit you like it hit me, share it. Subscribe for more cases that need to be told. And remember, behind every headline, there are real people whose lives were cut short. Stay safe out there. Families should be a refuge, but even the closest ties can fracture. Stay alert, look out for one another, and reach out if you sense danger. See you in the next story here on Fatal Family Network. Thanks for watching.